In the last video, we saw in part 1 that the definition of marriage is what gives us the guideline, the basis for how to build our relationships, guys and girls relationships among each other, and how it actually works biblically. Last time I explained to you that the spirit needs to join the spirit of both people. Since we are spirit, soul, and body, the spirit of both people need to join, and that spirit is in a connection with God. Since the spirit is the connection that we have with God, the girl joins at a connection with God in the spirit, and a covenant with the man to join with God in spirit. And the man does the same thing. To join with the girl in spirit, he makes a connection in spirit with the girl in a covenant with God. The soul joins in emotional connections, and in connections of the thought and mind and heart, of how they react to each other and how they get this sentimentalism and these emotions for each other. The body joins, in sexual relations, like we saw before. I gave you the verse last time for the body connections, how they join in body, but we also were missing the verses for the soul. And in the verse for the soul, it's in Song of Solomon 4, verse 9, which says, "You have made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. You have made my heart beat faster with a single glance of your eyes, with a single strand of your necklace." What this verse is showing is an emotional connection between the guy who's writing this verse and the girl. He is in heart. It says, "You have made my heart beat faster." And how do you react in emotional connections with a girl? Normally, you say expressions like those. You say things like, "My heart is beating faster for that girl every time I think about her." Because it's an emotional connection. And this verse shows how the soul joins the heart, the soul containing the heart, joins in emotional connections with each other. The next verse, the verse for the spirit, it's actually 3 verses. One is in Romans chapter 7, verse 2 and 3. It starts saying, "For but the married woman is bound by law to her husband while he is living. But if her husband dies, she is released from the law concerning the husband. So then, if while her husband is living she is joined to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, then she is free from the law, so that she is not an adulteress, though she is joined to another man." This verse is just establishing, these 2 verses are establishing the connection that there is a covenant with God in spirit. They're just saying that as the law, the woman is bound by the law in a covenant of marriage to the man. Now, if the man dies, then she's not bound to him anymore, because he's already dead. This spiritual connection is not needed anymore. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17, it says, "But the one who joins himself to the Lord is one spirit with him." There we can see that there's a connection between joining together, a man and a woman, and God, joining with God. It says there, if one joins himself with God, then he is one spirit with him. You see, there is the word spirit, which mentions the connection with God and the joining together of 2 beings, of 2 entities. That's what happens when the spirit joins between them and God. And see this triangle that's formed there? That is the marriage connection. See, they are joined in every aspect of their beings, and they are joined together with God in a covenant of marriage. And that's why this cannot be dissolved. And then the last verse about the spirit and how they join in connection with the spirit says in Matthew 19:6, "So they are no longer 2, but they are one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." So you see, these 2 people now, God is saying they're not 2 anymore. They're one. They're already joined with each other. And that joining of the spirit, soul, and body with God is what a marriage is called in the Bible. Now, this part of the video, during this part, I want to emphasize more on how we sin in our relationships, in our present day relationships then. Because if we have now the foundation of the biblical foundation of relationships between a man and a woman, now we can have kind of like a way for us to know how to behave today in our relationships with girls, from guys to girls and from girls to guys. How are we supposed to behave? What does the Bible say about it? Well, I'm going to show you now, according to this picture, how we sin in our relationships today. So, in our relationships, first, as I told you before, if none of them are joined, then there's singleness. If all of them are joined, there's marriage. If you join in one of them without joining them all, you are sinning. And that's what I want to define right now. We sin first by uniting in any one of these aspects. And if we're not joining in all of them together at once, then we are already in sin. When we join in body and we're not joining in soul and spirit, when we join in soul and not joining in body and spirit, when we join in spirit and we're not joining in soul and body. And I want to show you first how it happens in the body. In this aspect of the body, we sin first when we're not married and we join physically, which is called in the Bible fornication. And the verse for that is in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 15 through 20. It says, "Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take away the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? May it never be. Or do you not know that the one who joins himself with a prostitute is one body with her? For he says, the two shall become one." See, when you join with a prostitute, you become one with her, according to God. But the one who joins himself to the Lord is one spirit with him. So if you join together with the Lord first, you're one spirit with God first. That's why he says in verse 18, "Flee immorality. Every other sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body." There's also another verse in 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians says, "For this is the will of God, your sanctification. That is, that you abstain from sexual immorality. That each of you know how to possess your own vessel in sanctification and honor." See, what God is showing there is, if these guys are not married and they want to join in a physical connection, in a connection in body, if they are not married, this is called fornication. And this is clearly a sin in the Bible. It says we should flee from sexual immorality. It says you have been bought with a price, therefore glorify God with your bodies. That's why we cannot join in any physical sexual relation with a girl or with a guy if we're not married. We need to be in the covenant of marriage in order for us to join in body. Now, we also sin in our bodies, in our physical connections, if we are already married and we join physically with another woman, with someone else. That is called adultery in the Bible. And I'm going to show you first Exodus 20, verse 14, which is one of the commandments, and it says simply, "You shall not commit adultery." And that's what adultery is called. Now 1 Corinthians 7:4 says, "The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does." See, when they are already married, the wife does not have authority of her body anymore. It's the husband who has that authority. And the husband does not have authority over his own body anymore. It's the wife that does. See, since there is this connection in body, physically, then they are supposed to be united, and they cannot unite with another person because they're already in the covenant of marriage. Hebrews 13:4 says, marriage is to be held in honor among all, and the marriage bed to be undefiled. For fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. See, very clearly the Bible talks about our physical connections and how in marriage you're not supposed to join to another person if you're already married. And if you're not married, you cannot join with a person sexually either, because there is a connection in body that has to be established only in the covenant of marriage. Now, the next point is in soul. How do we sin in our connections in soul? And this, I think, is going to be more controversial than what you have thought. This is why, and this is the basis for our emotional connections with girls, and why I believe that the modern day dating concept, dating relationships, they are sinful. I believe so because the Bible shows very clearly, like I said before, there is no connection in guys or girls in the Bible shown before they are married. The Bible only shows singleness and it shows marriage. And here in our soul, we are sinning a lot in our relationships today because of this. The first point, it says, how you sin when you're not married and you join emotionally with someone. If these two guys are not married, if there is no connection here, you cannot join in soul with a girl, because this is what a sin is. See Exodus chapter 20 verse 17. It says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The point here is to covet. Covet means to desire someone. See, that is an emotional connection. That is an emotional thing. When you look at a girl and you like her and you desire her, that's coveting. And when you are joining in soul and you're not married and you're joining in soul with that girl, you're already sinning. See, the next verse is in Matthew chapter 5 verse 28, which says, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. See, this is a connection in soul, because God is not only saying here, Jesus is saying, not only saying that if you join physically with her, you're committing adultery, but he's also saying, even if you have it in your heart, if you have it inside of you, if you're having it in your mind to join with her, not only sexually, just that you desire her, just that you want her, that you want to be with her, that you constantly think about her and being with her and talking with her and joining in that emotional connection, in that soul connection with her. Jesus is already saying here, you don't only have to join physically. Even if you join in your heart, in your soul, you're already committing adultery with her in your heart. Because you're already joining something that is supposed to be united only in marriage. When you have your body connection, when you have your spirit connection with God in your covenant of marriage. The next point is, you not only sin when you're not married and you join emotionally with her, but you also sin when you are married already and you join emotionally with someone else. See, it's easy for us to say, well, how is it a sin if I'm not married? But now, if these two guys are married and this guy joins emotionally with another woman, would you see that as a sin? Of course you would, because it's clearly a sin. See, emotional connections, soul connections, count the same as body connections, as spirit connections. It's all the same thing. If the guy is already married with this girl. He's already supposed to have this soul connection with her, this body connection with her, this spirit connection with her. And if he starts having an emotional connection with another woman during marriage, he's already breaking this connection here. He's already starting to break this bond, which God does not allow and which God calls clearly a sin. And the verses for this point are the same exact ones as for the ones before. When not married and we join emotionally, Exodus 20:17 says, do not covet. If you desire another woman or someone else's woman, you're already committing, you're already coveting. And if like Jesus said, if you're lusting after this woman, if you're thinking about her, if you're trying to get emotionally connected with her, you're already doing the same thing. You're already committing adultery with her in your heart if you're married. And if you're not married, you're fornicating with her in your mind, in your heart, in your emotional relationships, in your emotional connections. See, this guy cannot join emotionally to another woman when he's already in marriage. And the same way, if there is no marriage, if you are single, you cannot join to a girl in an emotional connection, in a heart connection, in a soul connection, if you are not married. These things are for marriage. The connections are for marriage. So in the next video, I want to talk a little more about our soul emotional relationships with a girl and with a guy. And I'm going to cover the next point, which is your connection in spirit and how we sin in your relationships when you connect in spirit. So a little more on the soul and a little more on the spirit on the next video.